Hey guys, Lazerbolt here, and welcome to another episode. Today we're going to check out the Captain Sim C-130J Super Hercules. It's available in the Flight Sim 2024 marketplace. It's essentially the same as the C-130H and the C-130J that Captain Sim released for the 2020 sim, but this one's fully compatible with Flight Simulator 2024. The difference between the C-130J and the C-130H is pretty minimal, with the most notable difference being a 6-bladed prop instead of just 4 blades. The cockpits and performance are identical. Well, there's a crazy storm heading this way, and we're sitting cold and dark here in Bryce Canyon. Let's get this Hercubird fired up and fly on out of here. First, get that yoke out of your way. Okay, let's head up to the overhead panel and begin the startup procedure. First, make sure that all your generator switches are turned off, including the air turbine motor generator. Now make sure that your 2 inverter switches are in the off position. Notice how one of them says off over here and the other one says off down here. Now we tie the AC external power into the AC system. Open the cover to the bus tie switch and flip it. And then connect the battery to the main DC bus. And now we have enough power to get these engines started. Go up to the gas turbine compressor all the way at the top of the panel here. First thing we do is open the GTC door and wait for the light here to come on. Make sure the bleed air valve switch is closed and the air turbine motor is stopped before we start the compressor. We're going to rotate this knob to the start position, and then it'll return to the run position all by itself. This little light here turns on, letting you know that the compressor is spooling up. It takes about 20 seconds or so, and you'll know when the compressor is at full speed when the green light turns on. That's when you open the bleed air valve and turn on the air turbine motor. Now go down here and turn on the ATM generator switch. Now tie both inverters into the DC power bus by putting them straight up and down like this. We need to get some fuel flowing, then we can start these engines. If you go down here behind the co-pilot's yoke, you'll notice the 4 fuel pump switches. Make sure those are all on in the up position. Now we're ready to open the crossfeed valves and get some fuel to these engines. Alright, let's begin firing up this beautiful Hercubird by putting engine number 1 bleed air switch from the off position all the way down to override. Now go down to the engine 1 condition lever and push it all the way forward to the start position. Then back up top and hit the engine 1 starter switch. It'll go down to the start position and then click back up after the engine starts. And just like that, engine 1 comes to life. We'll just give it a few moments to get caught up to speed here before moving on to the rest of the engine. Boy, listen to that. These Rolls-Royce engines sound amazing, don't they? They definitely improved the sounds on this version of the Hercules. Once our engine stabilizes, we'll go up here and turn on our engine 1 generator. I've been told the proper procedure is to start engines 1 and 3 first and then move on to engines 2 and 4. So we'll put the engine 3 bleed air switch down to override next. Now go down and push the engine 3 condition lever forward and start engine 3. Once the engine is stabilized, turn on generator number 3 and we'll just repeat that procedure for the other 2 engines. And looky there, all 4 engines are running smooth and stable. Turn on the last generator and we can disengage the gas turbine compressor. First, close the bleed air valve and turn off the air turbine motor. Now turn the GTC control to off and close the door. Click all 4 bleed air switches from override to on. Last thing we need to do is to tie the inverter switches into the AC system like this. Just remember, yellow is AC power, green is DC power, and red is fuel flow. Now let's get this Herky Bird onto the runway and take a little flight to Grand Junction, Colorado. I think 4 notches of flaps ought to be enough to get us out of here. And we are spooling up and rolling. Bear in mind that the elevation here at Bryce Canyon is almost 8,000 feet, so the air is pretty thin up here and we're going to need to use the entire runway. These huge birds like the Hercules never look like they're going very fast, but we're picking up speed in a hurry. Now let's put those gear up and slowly raise our flaps to establish a nice steady climb out of here. Go down here and you'll see all the autopilot controls just under the throttle and condition levers. The important components here are the radio beam coupler switch, the autopilot main switch, the altitude control switch over here, and the pitch control knob. Here, let me move the camera down here a little bit and we can see our instruments while we're doing it. First, we'll turn on the autopilot main switch. This will hold the Hercules on a steady heading and in a steady climb. Now rotate the pitch control knob using the mouse wheel to bring the nose of the airplane down and give us a more reasonable vertical speed here. Alright, let's check the airport information for Grand Junction Regional. Looks like Grand Junction is at an elevation of 4,800 feet and we're going to come in on runway 11. We're rapidly approaching 14,000 feet. I think that'll be plenty for what we're doing here. Let's activate our altitude control switch and level right off. There you go, the vertical speed is leveling out and we're holding an altitude of just over 14,000. Now let me show you how to get this beautiful Hercules to follow the pink line on your flight plan. We need to go to the radio beam coupler and switch it from gyro pilot over to range localizer. Now set your mode selector switch to nav and the aircraft will lock on and is now lining up with the pink line. And notice now it gives you the distance to your next waypoint. Neat. Well, we got about 135 miles to go to get to Grand Junction. With the storm picking up outside, let's prepare for an ILS landing at runway 11. The plan is to approach the airport from the left by going down this corridor. Looks like runway 11 is a huge 10,400 foot of bituminous and has an ILS localizer with a frequency of 110.3. Let's enter that into our navigation radio, which is located just behind the throttle quadrant. Here you have your Nav 1 and Nav 2 radios. Now let's set the Nav 1 frequency to 110.3 by spinning the dial using the mouse wheel. It's already pretty close. There you go, just like that. Now we go back down to the radio beam coupler switch and put it all the way over to the AFF setting. Now the airplane is being held on a steady heading and the beam coupler is waiting to pick up the ILS feather for runway 11. Let's go a few degrees left here by using our flight director to follow the heading bug on the directional indicator. Just use the heading set knob to place the bug on your desired heading. Now when we switch the flight director from normal to manual, it will begin following the heading bug. It doesn't matter what the beam coupler is set to or what the main mode selector switch is on. When you switch the flight director from normal to manual, it will always follow your heading bug. And this way we can swing out to the left a little and start lining up with runway 11. Time to begin descending. Remember, our destination is at an elevation of 4,800 feet. So in order to come in under the glide slope, we want to be less than 4,000 feet above the ground once we're within 20 miles or so. So that means we need to bring it down to about 8,800 feet and we should be fine. Disengage the altitude control switch and use the pitch control knob to pitch the nose of the plane down, and we'll begin our descent. Make sure to pay close attention to this because the Hercules doesn't allow you to set a specific altitude to hold at. You just need to pay attention and hit the altitude hold switch when you reach your desired altitude. Alright, we're getting pretty close now. Notice that runway 11 at Grand Junction is at a heading of 116 degrees magnetic. This is important information that we're going to need here soon, so remember that number. Now when we get to within 26 miles of the airport, you should be close enough to lock onto the ILS feather by putting the mode selector switch to VOR ILS 1. And when we flip the flight director switch back to normal, the aircraft will begin to line itself up with runway 11. Now remember that runway heading of 116 degrees? Time to enter that here using the course set knob. It's probably best to set this before putting the flight director switch back to normal, but we still have plenty of time. Just don't forget about it. Now that we're within 20 miles of the runway, the glide slope indicator will appear on your artificial horizon. That's this big old arrow here. As long as the indicator is above the horizon, you're all set. The arrow will slowly fall, and when it reaches the horizon, the aircraft will lock on and begin descending. If the arrow is below the horizon, you are either too close, or you're too high, or both, and you'll need to turn around and try again. And looky there, we're automatically turning to final. Now that our glide slope indicator has almost reached the horizon, let's start slowing down and gradually add some flaps. And bingo! This Hercules has latched onto that glide slope and we're coming in. Now that we're about 8 miles out, let's go gear down and continue dropping speed. We are on an absolutely perfect approach here coming into Grand Junction, but bear in mind that we'll have to disengage the autopilot before actually touching down. Let's do that now by turning off the autopilot main. You can get rid of this annoying warning light by hitting the autopilot reset switch right here next to the beam coupler. Well, the brutal crosswind here has already pushed us off course, but let's bring this bird back on target and prepare for touchdown. And that's how you do it right there. Alright guys, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.